Record, sponsored by Hartford Healthcare.
Welcome back on this Sunday morning. Last week, the state's Democratic and Republican parties endorsed candidates to run in the general election. This week, some of those not receiving the endorsements have decided to pursue positions through an August 9th primary. Joining me to talk about some of the notable primary races is Dan Haar. He's a columnist and an associate editor with Hearst, Connecticut Media, a frequent guest of the program as well. So a lot to talk about. We've talked about this kind of speculating on what may happen down the road.
Yes.
Now we've got some people who are in, and I want to kind of walk through these races, Dan, and take a look at what happened, what's going to be happening here. The first one is one we know is headed for a primary, and that is the Republican race for U.S. Senate. We have a graphic we can show you who's there. Themis Klarides won the nomination. Leora Levy and Peter Lumage will primary. Now, you said when you were on this show that this was going to be a cakewalk for Themis Klarides. You did something that very few journalists like to do. You got out your calculator, and you have some thoughts on that.
Okay, I did say that it will be a cakewalk for Themis. What I'm going to correct to say is that it could be a cakewalk for Themis if she actually campaigns, and here's why. I got to thinking about that, and I got to talking with people. The politics of the moment says that she wins easily, both because she has the better recognition, she is the better campaigner, she has the most experience, and because she's a moderate, and the other two are conservative. And while the Republican electorate is conservative in a primary, only 420 or so thousand registered Republicans. These are not the moderate independents. They are conservative. You have two conservatives splitting that vote, both of whom have a very interesting and similar backstory. The problem is, of 400,000 voters, you figure 100,000 or so will show up at the primary. We got a little taste of summer weather on Friday. It's not looking like election time. It's feeling like some other thing. Get out and vote, right? So, you know, on an August Tuesday, maybe you're not going to see a big crowd. That means with three people in the race, 40 to 45,000 votes could win it for somebody if they all poll reasonably well. And that means that if Themis Klarides isn't careful, one of those other two opponents will get his or her votes out, and it could be a surprise. But just on front door political issues, she should have an easy win to face Richard Blumenthal.
Should have an easy win. We'll watch the shoe leather and see how much work the other two do.
I'm equivocating from last week a little bit, so, you know, you got to... There we go.
All right, sounds good. Let's go on to the next race. We're talking Republicans again, Secretary of the State. We have an endorsed candidate. We have one who will primary, and Brock, who has qualified for the primary, Brock Weber.
Yes.
Tell us about these candidates in this race.
Here you have the opposite of what it was in the Republican side for the Senate race, where the more moderate person was endorsed. Here, the more conservative Dominic Rapini from, I think, Guilford or Madison. I always get those towns. He's from Shoreline East. He's more conservative. And he's gone after, you know, he's brought actions against what he thinks he perceives to be voter fraud and so forth. The other two are perceived as being moderate, more moderate. I say perceived because these are not people who have been in the statewide arena necessarily. Terry Wood has as a state representative and is known as a moderate who works with Democrats. So she didn't have as long to campaign and didn't raise as much money and didn't get out to the delegates as much. She might have been a front runner in that race. Brock Weber works for the New Britain Mayor Stewart. We haven't heard whether he's in. He has "I'm in" on the top of his website, but I think it's an old "I'm in." I'm not sure. We're still waiting to hear from him.
All right, but at any rate, we're going to have a primary because we know that at least Terry Wood is in, so there will be a primary in that race for Secretary of the State on the Republican side.
That's right, and Brock Weber did raise a lot of money, $82,000 as of the first quarter, so he should be in based on the money he raised.
All right, let's move over to the Democratic side. We're going to look first at the Secretary of the State race. We have the endorsed candidate, Stephanie Thomas. We have Hilda Santiago and Maritza Bond, who have qualified for the primary. You said one interesting thing in this is labor support.
Yes. Senator Matt Lesser had significant labor support. Hilda Santiago has significant labor support. If she's in, Senator Lesser is out. He's opted out, seeing the ethnic and racial and gender tea leaves, he opted out. So, and he was perceived as one of the front runners. Representative Hilda Santiago from Meriden hasn't said whether she's in. We're hearing that she's leaning against. Whether that's not confirmed, I haven't confirmed it, but we're hearing that she's leaning against. So if she's out, that leaves a two-person race of a very high interest because you have two people who are somewhat outsiders. Although Representative Thomas, Stephanie Thomas, who got the endorsement, is a sitting state rep, only one term without the political base. And so you're going to have the Hispanic female Maritza Bond, very outgoing, very aggressive campaigner, very outspoken, the Hispanic community, Latino community wants to see someone on the ticket. It has never happened, shockingly. This is 17% of the population of Connecticut, albeit it's not 17% in a block, because obviously the Hispanic community is broad and includes a number of different communities within it. Nonetheless, that's going to be part of what's happening. Labor support. Representative Thomas didn't vote in the CBAC vote, and she's not perceived as being pro-labor. And as you know, labor has a disproportionate impact in primaries because it's a smaller number of people voting. So that's part of your hardcore.
Something to keep an eye on.
That could be a factor. Maritza Bond is not the labor candidate the way the other two were, but she has good relations with labor as the health director of New Haven, at least as far as I know.
And let me ask you about the state treasurer race on the Democratic side. We have a graphic for that one as well. Eric Russell, the endorsed candidate there. Karen DuBois-Walton will primary. Dita Vergara will primary. So we're going to have a primary there.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
They both of those primary candidates declared from the podium where they conceded the endorsement to Eric Russell.
That's politics right there.
Dita Vergara, you got to give her credit. She actually said, as she was not endorsing Eric Russell, but as she was conceding the vote and saying we don't have the votes, because it was a close race it wasn't that he won handily, but it was close as to whether there would need to be a second ballot. He didn't have a majority. And she said, I bid you farewell for today as your future state treasurer. And she ran, of course, in the primary in 2018, got about 43%. There again, race is an issue. The Democrats have not nominated a person for state treasurer who was not African American since 1958. The last person someone nominated by the Democrats for state treasurer who was white, 1958. Eric Russell is black. Karen DuBois-Walton, she's the head of the Housing Authority in New Haven. She's black. That's going to be part of that issue, but also you have what is their experience. Dita Vergara is an actual money manager. She says you need that. Eric Russell is in the financial services business. He says you need that. Karen DuBois-Walton is a manager of a bureaucracy, the housing department. Housing authority. She says you need that. Voters have a choice.
All right. We're all out of time. We're going to leave it there. Dan Hart, you can read his columns online at ctinsider.com. You'll also find them in the paper. Local newspapers, including the New Haven Register, the Register Citizen, and the Middletown Press. Imagine that online and in an actual newspaper, Dan.
It's print. You can fold it up and take it with you. It doesn't go away. It's a great thing.
All right, Dan. Thank you very much. We'll, of course, see you again soon.